First of all, what the hell is going on with time at the moment? January seemed to go on forever and ever and ever, and then all of a sudden February's playing catch up and we're nearly at March. So that leaves us with two very exciting things fast approaching. The first is Derrythorn, which takes place in March. The second is the announcement of the Women's Prize for Fiction longlist, which will be announced on the 4th of March. And it's the latter that we're going to talk about today. So it's important to say that this is my wish list, not a predictions list. I don't know the prize well enough to be making predictions, and it's far more fun to me to make this a wish list of things that I would like to see on my ideal long list. I still tried to keep within the parameters of the prize though, and loosely that's books written by people who identify as women that have been published in the UK in the last year-ish. So there are 16 books on the long list, and I've whittled my initial 27 down to 16 for you. But here are the books that I considered that didn't quite make the cut. My list has been in the making since about September last year, when I started a notes page of new releases that were coming out that I thought would be relevant or eligible. And it's been changing right up until this morning when I watched Scott from Gunpowder Fiction and Plots video, and one of his predictions sounds like Kerry Catnip, and so has completely thrown my list off. So of these books on my wish list, I've actually read 2.5, and I'll leave those ones right till the end. So the first book on my wish list for the Women's Prize 2025 is The Anthropologists by Aysegul Savas. A couple have moved to a foreign city and they are apartment hunting together. They're working out how they fit into this new environment and are looking to build their own customs to create their own sense of home as a couple. This simple apartment search is described as a soulful, often funny examination of modern coupledom, home building and expat life in a modern city. Next up is Whaleful by Elizabeth O'Connor. In the absence of a Welsh author on my wish list, I have at least included a book set in Wales. Mahloudji lives on a remote Welsh island with her sister and father. She's curious about life off island, and this is piqued by the arrival of two Englishmen who are doing some research on island life. I love an island setting. I think it's such an interesting narrative device, and so I'd love to see this on the long list. The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. This book sounds like an awful lot of fun. A woman finds herself stuck in a reality where every time her husband goes up into the loft, he comes down a different person, and therefore it triggers like a different life. It sounds like a kind of cross between Sliding Doors and The Midnight Library, and I'm very much here for it. Fundamentally by Nussaibah Younis. This is one of my most anticipated releases for 2025. I think it sounds great. When Dr. Nadia Amin, a long-suffering academic, publishes a paper on how to de-radicalise young women from ISIS, the UN comes a-calling and she is recruited to do just that. Looking for a way out of London after a difficult and unexpected breakup, she jumps at the chance. Amid controversy over the ethics of her suggested programme, Nadia meets Sarah, a young refugee who is also a fellow East Londoner. The two form a rapport, and Nadia is absolutely determined to help get Sarah back to the UK. It's described as wickedly funny and audacious, which I am very much in the mood for. Spoilt Creatures by Amy Twigg. A young woman in search of retreat joins a community of women living off-grid in a commune on a rural farm in England, where they make their own rules and live as they like. But like all communities, there's politics and dissent, and this is tested with the arrival of a group of men on their farm. I love stories that centre groups of women and explore matriarchies and what women's sociology would look like outside of patriarchal confines. Good Girl by Aria Aber. This is described as an electric debut novel about the daughter of Afghan refugees and her year of exploring nightclubs, bad romance and self-discovery through the underground club scene of Berlin. I'm really into the premise of this and will be looking to pick it up whether it makes the long list or not. Universality by Natasha Brown. At an illegal rave in the Yorkshire countryside, a young man is almost beaten to death with a gold bar. A young journalist investigates, connecting the dots between an amoral banker landlord, an iconoclastic columnist and a radical anarchist movement that's taken up residence on the farm. The Safekeep by Yael van der Wouden. This is my hope for the Booker Women's Prize crossover. There's often a kind of Booker nominated book also on the Women's Prize, so this is my hope for that one. Isabel lives alone in her late mother's country home, very peacefully, but everything's upended when her brother turns up with his graceless girlfriend, leaving her on Isabel's doorstep as a guest for the season. The Most by Jessica Anthony. This sounds like a really great time. Kathleen decides not to join her husband and son at church on Sunday, but instead goes into the pool and decides not to get out. This is set in the 1960s, over the course of just one day, and we get to see the unspoken truths behind this seemingly idyllic marriage. The Persians by Sanam Mahloudji. This is another book that's tempted me because of its claim to being funny. I'm going to read the blurb for this one. Meet the Valiat family. In Iran, they were somebodies. In America, they're nobodies. First, there is Elizabeth, the regal matriarch with the famously large nose, who stayed in Tehran during the revolution. Her daughters, Shirin and Seema, left for America in 1979. She lives in a shabby apartment, paranoid and alone, except when she is visited by Nayaz, her Islamic law-breaking granddaughter, who takes her debauchery with a side of purpose, yet somehow manages to survive. The other granddaughter, Bita, is a self-righteous but lost law student, spending her days in New York City, eating pancakes and quietly giving away her belongings. When an annual vacation in Aspen goes wildly awry and Shirin ends up being bailed out of jail by Bita, the family's brittle status quo cracks open. Shirin embarks upon a grand but half-baked quest to restore the family name. But what does that even mean in a country where the Valiats never mattered? Will they ever realise that life is more than just an old story? The Wardrobe Department by Elaine Garvey. Now, when I mentioned this one in my anticipated releases video, I think, Charlie commented and said, oh, this sounds like Women's Prize catnip, and I couldn't agree more. Having moved from rural Donegal to London's West End, Mayrad grapples with trying to make her new life in the costume department at a theatre work while balancing the pull of her Irish roots. It says it's told with rare honesty, with equal measures of warmth and bite. It's a story about reckoning with the past, finding the courage to change the present, and asking what comes next. Nesting by Roisin O'Donnell. With no savings or plan, Kira grabs her two daughters and a handful of clothes from a washing line and jumps in a car and leaves her husband. And nesting is about how she manages what happens next. That balance of sticking to her convictions and also managing the pressure from her ex-husband to come home. It takes a huge amount of strength and courage to leave a bad relationship, but what comes next often demands all the more, and I really like that this book is shining a light on that. A House for Miss Pauline by Diana McCaulay. Now, this is the book that Scott at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot introduced to me just this morning, but it went greedily on my wish list and I couldn't not include it here. 99-year-old Pauline is sure she won't make her 100th birthday, and she has an awful lot of work to do before she passes. Enlisting the help of her American granddaughter, this retired ganja farmer sets about righting the wrongs done to her ancestors in this Jamaican plantation's colonial past. I do love me an older protagonist. There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak. I'm halfway through listening to this at the moment and it's exactly as wonderful as you would expect from Elif Shafak. Told across 4 timelines, she uses water to transport her narrative and themes of place, belonging, ownership, memory, and reshapes our view of who owns history. Now on to the books that I have read and finished and would really love to see on the Women's Prize long list. First up is Passiontide by Monique Roffey. Set on a fictional Caribbean island the day after Carnival, where a young woman is found dead. This sparks an uprising of women on the island against femicide and violence against women. The book features perspectives from detectives, island officials, sex workers, activists, and even the dead woman herself. I find Monique Roffey's writing really powerful and it ignites something in me every time. I really loved how she ended this book too. It's infuriating and real and feels like a literary battle cry. Last but not least, If there was a wild card, it's this. But as I said, this is my wish list and it's not my predictions. But I would bloody love to see Waiting for a Party by Vesna on the Women's Prize long list. I love this book so much and it's continued to grow on me over time. Claire is in her 90s and she's waiting to be picked up to be taken to a celebration of a friend's birthday. As she waits, she looks back on the last 30 years or so of her life since her husband died, during which time she's nurtured lifelong friendships, she's found her identity outside her marriage, she's built an unconventional family unit, and she's had some outrageously wild sexual encounters. I literally squealed when Scott at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot put this on his predictions. I really don't think it's going to be there, but a girl can dream, and I cannot tell you how absolutely stoked I would be to see this on the list. So that's your lot. I can't wait to see what other people put on their predictions and what they're wishing for from the long list. I really love to see the creative way that people come up with their lists too. That's always really good fun at this time of year. I think Charlotte Malloy last year used tarot. Love that. I really love the anticipation of prize lists. I tend to treat the actual list when they come out as a bit of a buffet to choose from. I don't tend to read them in completion. But I've read some absolute bangers from prize lists, and so I'm dead excited for this one. I would love to know what you're hoping to see on the long list. Do let me know in the comments, and until next time, look after yourself and I'll see you again in the next video.